use 3 for guests, 1 for employee. Spa use 1. Employee housing 2. 2-bedroom 513 accessory apartments 2. The site plan also provides for a required loading space and offers a temporary drop-off parking space. The property is located on Beach Avenue, a state road, and will require a physical alteration permit from RIDOT for the new curb cut. The plan considers and protects against any degradation of service or groundwater quality through stormwater management and soil erosion and sedimentation control measures. Proper soil erosion and sedimentation control measures will be employed. Anticipated stormwater runoff from this developed site will not exceed peak runoff from the site prior to development. The site plans and drainage report have been reviewed by the town engineer, and his comments were addressed by the applicant in a follow-up letter dated May 5, 2022. The development will provide for adequate disposal of sewage, refuse, and other wastes. The property is located within the sewer and water districts. The development will be serviced by municipal sanitary sewer. Since water allocated has not been approved, the applicant is proposing continued use of a private on-site well. The development will not have an adverse impact on cultural assets or on areas of critical environmental importance, such as habitats or species listed as endangered, threatened, or of special concern by the Rhode Island Natural Heritage Program. The planning board approves this favorable advisory with the following conditions. Paved aprons for curb cuts on the state road have been requested by the town. The planning board recommends 20 feet in width. Current zoning regulations allow up to 2 bedrooms for housing units considered to be section 513 accessory apartments. The floor plan should be modified to reflect a layout that is consistent with current zoning for any proposed section 513 accessory apartments. Current zoning regulations require 513 accessory apartments in this zoning district mixed use be for year-round occupancy. The plan should be referred to the building official to confirm the proposed new structure does not exceed maximum building height as defined by the zoning ordinance. The applicant has not provided an outdoor lighting plan with the application or specific light fixture details. The planning board recommends the outdoor lighting on the site be limited to the amount necessary to provide safe pedestrian passage around the property and not for the purposes of highlighting architectural and landscape features. Fixtures should be dark sky compliant, shielded, direct downward, and compliant with the town zoning ordinance. The planning board considered requiring the installation of sidewalks at the site given the number of pedestrians the property use will generate. The planning board recommends that if sidewalks are planned in the future along this portion of Beach Avenue, the property owner be required to contribute the full cost of the installation of the sidewalks adjacent to the property. Do I have a second? Okay. Yeah. Allison, did you write it down with Bill?
He's not on video. Bill, can you hear us? So, I mean, Bill has emailed the draft. I didn't get any comments through email, but I thought maybe tonight he might offer some, so I just want to give him that opportunity. But I would say the planning board can, if you feel comfortable voting, and we can, if there's a legal concern, we can have, we'll tweak it. I mean, it's an advisory only. It'll go to the zoning board, so we can kind of clarify, and they'll be the ones that have the final actual conditions. So.
All right. Any questions or comments?
I'm just wondering, today, okay, under conditions, I'm just curious with the lighting and the architectural features, is it clear in the notation that architectural features would include business signage on the streets, would be,
We could add that in.
mixed use. I don't know.
There would be an in sign, I'm sure.
I'm sure there's some.
So you're saying you don't want the,
Which they probably have, and I can't remember whether the inn that's right next door to it has a sign or not.
They have a
It does.
sign.
It does.
Okay.
I'm sure it's lit.
It might have a little light at the
It might
bottom.
have a light on the ground,
We certainly
but
want,
that would still have to abide by the light ordinance too.
we have to abide by the light ordinance, but we certainly don't want to prevent, treat them differently than what we would be treating.
Absolutely, sure.
So just maybe, something to the effect that, that decide to be, lit, must follow the, town ordinances.
Yeah, the town lighting ordinance.
Try and look now.
okay.
Just to emphasize that. Anything else? That's it, okay? Chris, anything from you? Okay, I'm fine. Motion fine. You Bill?
Good.
Gail?
I did have one more question.
Oh, that's great. It's
For the
fine.
spa, are we to be concerned about what's used in there as a spa in terms of products that could be probably for drinking water in your well? Or is that just regulated by the state?
I think they have to meet state regulations.
Okay.
Okay. All right. All those in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
All right, motion carries. Yeah, so, thank you very much. All right, number 5. Gaffett, executive estate from Louis Gaffett, plat 7, lot 159-2, and 160, plat 10, lot 68-1, 68-2, 68-3, 68-4, 68-5, 68-6, 68-7, 68-8. Decision for a minor subdivision for a reconfiguration of the right of way. I'd like to make a motion to approve the subdivision plan for reconfiguration of the right of way by David Hilburn, dated February 4th, 2014. A public hearing was held before the planning board on May 11th, 2022. The application is seeking approval to modify access to lot 68-7 from High Street. The application has received an insignificant alteration permit from RIDOC and renewal of freshwater wetlands permit from RIDEM. The modified site plan includes the creation of a new right of way through lot 159-1, lot 160 to lot 168-7. The proposed right of way is 30 feet wide with a 12-foot wide crushed stone driveway. The town engineer submitted a letter that the proposal meets town requirements. An updated right of way easement has been provided and reviewed by legal. As part of the decision, the board makes the following positive findings regarding the proposal. 1, each lot of the subdivision conforms to all standards and provisions of the new shore zoning ordinance. 2, there will be no significant negative environmental impact from the proposed subdivision. This is a modification to a prior approval and recorded subdivision and does not create any new lots for development. 3, all subdivision lots have adequate and permanent physical access to a public street. 4, the project will not unnecessarily impair scenic views, burden existing water supply, result in increased traffic congestion, create a ground of surface water pollution. 5, the plan provides for safe circulation of pedestrian and vehicle traffic. 6, the design and location of streets, building lots, utilities, drainage improvements, or other improvements in each subdivision or project does not create flooding. 7, the proposed subdivision is consistent with the comprehensive plan. And the conditions of preliminary approval: 1, all conditions set forth in the prior approval of the subdivision remain in effect. And 2, construction is to be completed prior to recording the final plan. Do I have a second? Second. Okay. Questions or comments? Bill, anything? Motion? Do this.
Good.
Very good. Okay. All those in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. All right. Like Michelle,
Oh, okay.
decision for an
She's
application for
recused.
preliminary plan for major subdivision plan off Main Road. Yeah, if you want to read it, that'd be fine. We start reading it together. I have a motion to approve. We stop at the end of the page. Yeah, we gotta go through all the conditions. That's not, I'll say my voice, thank you.
I move to approve to grant preliminary plan approval for the above referred subdivision plan as represented to the board prepared by Hilton and Land Surveying dated March 8, 2022. The public informational meeting on this application was held on February 9, 2022, and a public hearing was held on May 11, 2022. The plan involves creating 3 lots from 2 existing lots. Plat 10, lots 19-1 and 23-1. Lot 19-1 is permanently protected by a conservation easement held by the Nature Conservancy that was recorded in 1992. An existing single-family home is located on lot 19-1 within a reserved building envelope, and 2 new building envelopes are shown on existing lot 23-1. The proposed plan includes a 7 feet wide water line easement located along the stone wall between existing lot 23-1 and lot 19-1. The planning board voted to approve a waiver for the width of that easement to be 7 feet rather than the required 20 feet within the subdivision regulations. As part of its decision, the board made the following positive findings regarding the proposal on all standards listed in section 307. 1. The proposed subdivision is consistent with the comprehensive plan. In the residential A zoning district, the countryside, a desired land use pattern is of low-density residential development served by narrow lanes integrated into the existing pattern of fields and stone walls. 2. The proposed subdivision is in compliance with the standards and provisions of the town zoning ordinance. The proposed lots meet the minimum developable land area requirement as defined in the zoning ordinance. 3. There will be no significant negative environmental impacts from the proposed subdivision. A significant portion of the property is currently protected by a conservation easement. The Nature Conservancy and the applicant will be amending the conservation easement language to prohibit further development of the property following development proposed as part of this subdivision approval. 4. The subdivision will not result in the creation of lots with such physical constraints to development that building on those lots would be impracticable. The subdivision lots include a minimum of 120,000 square feet of upland area after deducting wetlands and easements serving other lots. The lots will be served by individual OWTS and soil evaluations have been conducted. 5. All subdivision lots have adequate and permanent physical access to a public street. Access to Payne Road from the proposed lots is provided from either an existing 40 feet wide right-of-way or its extension, a proposed 20 feet right-of-way. Plan includes the approximate location of home sites within their building envelopes and includes the construction of gravel driveways. 6. The project provides for safe circulation of vehicular traffic, adequate control of surface water runoff, suitable building sites, and the preservation of natural, historical, and or cultural features. Stormwater management measures are proposed for each of the 2 lots for development with roof leader connections to rain gardens. The project will meet the town's road construction standards to provide safe circulation of vehicular traffic. An existing stone wall, which follows the boundary of the conservation easement, will remain intact and not be disturbed
Yeah.
as a result of any future development of the property. 7. The design and location of streets, building lots, utilities, drainage improvements, or other improvements will not create flooding or soil erosion. 8. The project will not unnecessarily impair scenic views burden existing water supply, result in increased traffic congestion, create any ground of surface water pollution. Ground or
Or,
surface.
yeah, got
it. Alter or cut stone walls and disturb any identified unique and or significant historical or archaeological sites. The two single-family homes will not result in traffic congestion. Rain gardens have been proposed to filter stormwater and protect water quality. There are no known unique historical or archaeological sites on the property. A water line easement exists on the plan, and the application includes a letter from the water company that the current public water facility is close to capacity during peak weeks. The applicant is aware of this, and private well was mentioned as an alternative source of water supply if a connection to the public water service is not available in the future. The conditions of preliminary plan approval are as follows. 1, preservation of the stone walls existing on the property. 2, in addition to the note referring to referencing the legal document, the existing 8 feet wide vehicular access to abutting residential property, map 10, lot 16, should be labeled as a right of way, and the final plan to be recorded. 3, a stormwater management plan and calculations for the 2 lots for future development must be submitted for town engineer review and approval, with the town engineer's written findings to be included within the subdivision application file. 4, and last, if the administrative officer determines that the application for the final plan approval meets the requirements of the subdivision regulations and those set by the planning board as a condition of preliminary approval, and certifies the application as complete, the final plan shall be considered approved. The administrative officer shall report in writing final plan approval to the planning board at its next regular meeting following approval.
What was it? Do I have a second for this? Seconds? Any further comments, questions?
No.
No, Bill, anything?
No,
No. Eric? That's a silly question. Okay, in conditions number 2, it refers to an 8-foot wide vehicular access. That's not the same post plan as the 7-foot wide water line. 9-foot right of way. Different
this,
vehicular access.
yeah, this is for the, it's labeled as driveway on the plans in the past to the abutting property. So that's different than the water line easement. Is that what you're asking
Oh,
about?
that's gonna be labeled right of way now, it's a driveway,
Right.
yeah. All right.
Can I say something?
Yes, you may. Okay.
I believe it was May 13th, I submitted some things to Jen, or to the office, that Judy George had prepared for on that. So James Jeremiah stated that a hydraulic analysis prepared by a coastal engineer for the proposed rain gardens for each site meets the requirements of the town. We were informed that specific details as to the construction of each rain garden cannot be provided at this time. The 2 lots are intended for another generation of our family and are no plans for immediate development. The location of each dwelling within the building envelope, square footage of the proposed dwellings, the roof size and pitch, the location of downspouts, etc., they need specific plans. And we don't have those because it's not going to happen in the near future. So, this is from Mary George. She just said there's nothing we can do unless we have specific plans.
Makes sense. So Allison,
Yeah, I know they did submit some stormwater material. There was kind of back and forth, right, in the past. So
we haven't seen that, so.
Well, showing the rain gardens on the plan, there was some, you did submit,
Yes, yeah.
that was forwarded to the town engineer. Did he respond to your engineer? Did Jim Jeremiah respond to your,
He just said. that
this just,
the Town, a matter of town requirements, change every copy.
Yeah. yeah. So I would say, at this point, what the planning board's voting on is they're also signing off on final plan approval being handled administratively, so Jim Jeremiah can sign off on that, like administratively, so we can handle that without coming back to the planning board. So I can tweak this condition a little bit to not require actual calcs, but I will state that the stormwater requirements approved by the town engineer, like something like that. So just to show that we do have some documentation, the town engineers approved it, right, right. So I'll just, so that might be sufficient, but, so I can just change it to not be an actual plan. What?
She sent a copy to me, so Jen should have that letter from Jim Jeremiah.
Okay, I haven't seen it yet, but yeah, okay, thank you. So we'll make sure that Jim Jeremiah has, it's in the application file, the stormwater is sufficient at this stage of the,
So we
Development.
tweak that one thing and we'll
Yeah.
ask for it. Any other questions or comments? Okay, all those in favor, say aye, or against, say aye. Anybody against? Yeah. Thank you guys for a long journey. Thank you. Thank you. You're welcome to stay, but you're also welcome to go ahead and speak out. Now, Allison has to make the 6:30 vote. So Allison, would it be useful if we jump down to the comprehensive plan, because I know you have to submit that at the end of the month, so make sure we get through that.
sure, if that could be quick, I mean, depending on how
That
much,
should be quick, but I
yeah.
wanna make sure that you have
thank
that,
you. Then we'll
material.
know we have everything, right, as much time needed for the other zoning.
So,
So,
for the comprehensive plan for the 5-year information report, we submitted to the statewide plan, so I'll turn it over to Allison. You have a copy of the material that, the chart form, and we go from there.
sure, so I believe it was several months ago, probably the end of last year, I had let the planning board know that this was a requirement, this is a newer requirement. Once the comp plans went to a 10-year update versus 5, the state wanted, in exchange for that, say, like a halfway point, check-in. It's really an informal report, and it's just a way to encourage municipalities to make sure you're implementing and thinking about the comp plan and trying to implement it. So they had a template to use, just basically summarizing each of the sections. So what I did was put together, with the help of a lot of town staff, and different boards provided comments on, I sent out the implementation tables or actions, and got some feedback on some updates. So this is a summary. These aren't all of the actions, but a majority of them, as hopefully a way to meet this requirement. So I wanted to make sure the planning board was aware that this was, this had taken place, and that this was going to be submitted to statewide planning. And if you had any, if you were able to review it, I know it's lengthy, but if you had any comments on anything that you thought there might be a different update or additional comments on, that I could incorporate, or any questions about it.
Is it something, since I just got them, is it something I can review at home and email comments to you, would that help?
Sure, yeah.
If I have any.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, it's nothing that really needs to be approved, but I just thought I wanted to make sure it was on an agenda, and that you were aware of it and had the opportunity to comment on it.
We didn't go through this, it's pretty comprehensive.
Yeah,
All the stuff that we've done and what is pending and what is needing in long term, so. I was impressed.
and then Mark, Old Harbor Task Force, I know I reached out to you a while ago. Yeah. Mhm.
Which is great.
What date, Allison, would you like to hear our comments? Would you like?
Well, it's due the end of June, unfortunately, this month, yeah. So we've got a couple weeks, yeah. So why don't, yeah, maybe next,
By this time next week.
that would be good in a week if you have a chance, that way I can incorporate them and get it submitted.
But if you-
Yeah,
that
that'll
gives
work.
her, Allison needs some time to tweak anything necessary.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Okay, go right ahead.
On
That's what it'll be.
H1C1, I don't know, page 6,
Housing,
yeah.
Yep.
Where is that now?
is this for the 513th?
Yeah, well, I know it
Oh.
just says the town has mapped properties that could be considered for affordable or attainable.
There was one, so several years ago, we did that, with, Ed Roberge and Mark Tilson had some conversations, and I put together a map, at that time of potential properties. It was pretty expansive, though. I mean, it included a lot of the town properties, so, but actually, the town council this month, during a recent town council meeting, during the whole conversation about housing, this was an action item. So there's going to be an update to that map that will be available next week. That's probably going to be on the town council upcoming agenda. But we talked about having like a prioritized list of the top 5 town-owned properties that would be,
So is it
For
strictly
housing.
town-owned, or is it?
yeah, that's what
So
we're
it's
talking
not
about
a town-owned property that you've identified.
for mapping specific properties. Yes. Yeah, exclusive to town-owned, because that's what we have control over, right? To actually
True.
construct.
But from a,
Unit.
in a larger planning perspective.
Mhm.
I think, and I don't know how. Identify lots that are possibly attainable. And, I'm looking at working with groups that have the ability to obtain properties, not necessarily like for attainable.
Not, yeah, so,
And I don't know how to identify those. I've asked this question, I think, back when I was on the council, but specifically to Jen, and I think I asked you, right? Or maybe it was Big House, like how many lots are there? Why are we talking about all this stuff about how many big house lots are there actually, are we wasting our time? But as far as attainable and affordable home housing, how many lots are actually, can we identify that's beyond the town? And I don't know how to do that, but I don't know if it's worthwhile exploring. That's probably beyond the realm of GID.
that I can do from an aerial, I mean, yeah, local realtors might be able to help, but,
For instance, where I live, that wasn't town property.
Mhm.
And that homeowner certainly could have coughed up half that property, donated it, or sold development rights, and I'm not really, Jen's more familiar with how that was obtained.
Right.
That's kind of what I'm interested.
what potential, like what private property owners may be out there
Right.
that are willing to
Right.
work with the town or work with the,
They're probably go
housing
hand-in-hand
board.
with 5 people.
yeah. And it might not be something that we necessarily want to publish, even if we had some potential properties,
Yeah.
make it publicly. I wouldn't put a public map out of it. So there may be conversations that are going on or, will be going on, but
So you
not
have a
something
map of
now.
those, like for specifically what I said on page 6, that map exists.
There's one, several years ago, but there will be this month, it's going to be something
See
that,
it.
oh, yeah. You can see the one that, I think it was recently recirculated, but there'll be an updated one that prioritizes like the top 5 that are the best sites.
And my other question for you, Allison, is who is responsible for holding the short-term timeframes organizations be to the fire? Like, because that was my question again, way back when we were actually.
Oh.
The grid, like the big, like that was huge, and I was like, well, this is great. Well, who's gonna tell these people to do what they're supposed to do on the time frame? Like, who does that, whose job?
Well, so so for all
Our
the,
job?
well, the comp plan, really, the planning board does own this document. It really is your plan. Well, it's the town's plan, but you are responsible for its updates and implementation. So that short-term time frame is 1 to 3 years, and so that would have already passed because we're at the 5-year mark.
I mean, I give you an example, update island energy plan to reflect recent Bitco purchase in offshore wind farm, not completed. Well, we're supposed to complete it, do we need to?
And we have, within the comp plan, the full table does have responsible parties
Yes.
and listed.
And-
But again, it's
but
not-
We're at the point where those people told that they're responsible for it.
Right, that could be the case, and we,
Because these comp plans have been done every 10 years, and
Yeah.
they're good, they're a good tool, but if they're not used, then what's the point? Like, you're just spinning our wheels.
So I think the town manager ought to be the one to, if you want
I'm
to
going to-
release it.
Yeah.
well, and we could, what we did do, I don't know how, this was over a year ago, but we did circulate the tables, that implementation spreadsheet, to the different departments and,
And you also,
to-
various, committees, because I know, I got
Yeah.
those in the other packet.
yeah, so we did circulate those once since the planning board, and then I did reach out again for this, so there's been some of that, and there are a lot of, I would say, when the next update occurs, that there were over 200 action items. This is a
Yeah.
lot more than most communities, so I would say during the next update, probably slim it down a bit and not have so many, but I mean, and sometimes things, what happens is it may not be a priority, you know, and some things change and other priorities happen, so it's not necessarily that you are mandated to do whatever's in your comp plan, it's just, it's a plan, a planning tool, and
Right.
you can't necessarily achieve everything that's in here, but.
So maybe I missed it. What would you like from us in terms of this document?
Well, if you had comments, I just wanted to make you aware that this report had been prepared and that it was going to be submitted, required to be submitted at the end of this month. And then if you had any comments on the status, if you saw anything that was potentially inaccurate or any additions, things that you said, well, actually, you said it's not completed, but there was some progress. I think in the most cases, I included things that we had some progress on.
Okay. So any other comments or suggestions? We don't need to vote on this.
No.
And if you think of anything over the next, 3-4 days, feel free to email Allison with your thoughts. And get it to her soon enough so that she can work on this without having to do it at the last minute. Okay? One last chance, anything else? Okay. Okay, Allison, we have 3 things.
Okay,
We've got section, our new section 519 to look at. And then we've got section 513 to comment on, and the large housing. So I will turn this part of the program over to Allison and let her work.
okay, so if we could go start with the 513, that the planning board, the amendments that we have been working on. So this draft of potential amendments, and obviously it overlaps with what Chris Warfel had our discussions at prior meetings and in his draft, but section A, that's just a tweaking of the purpose. It's not really critical to the conversation. I just thought rewording. It's really just a rewording, but so section B, affordable accessory apartments. So this is the subsection that really hadn't been utilized. These are like the deed restricted, that would, require monitoring, and there was comments about some concerns that potentially it hadn't been utilized because of that, that penalty, that payback was a concern as being too maybe aggressive, and then the Block Island Housing Board had brought this up too, as far as like monitoring responsibility. So it's been stricken, I guess. What one recommendation was, I have it in my memo here. And I kind of explained it here, but the existing subsection B hasn't been utilized. There are no 513s taking advantage of the tax benefit or considered affordable, like with a capital A, deed restricted. And I did want to point out that that doesn't, just because it's not in there, like the housing board could, anybody could deed restrict a property, you know, a 513, without it being laid out within a zoning ordinance. And yeah, that withdrawal repayment fee was raised as a concern. And then there was a potential discussion about having 513s, like deed restricted language created in a different section. So I just thought, to simplify things, maybe the best solution is to strike that subsection out of section 513, because there were several issues. It hadn't been utilized. So B, the new B, general standards. So here's where we were talking about providing a little more flexibility to encourage the use of 513s. So increasing it from a maximum of 2 bedrooms to a maximum of 3 bedrooms by right. And then there's some language here that seems to be redundant. I just cleaned that up. Then section C, we're talking about standards for 513s within residential zones. But there's also been the case where there might be residential properties that within other zoning districts. So do you want to broaden that a bit? And same thing with the commercial, because there's different standards for 513s in commercial zones where versus 513s in residential zones as far as occupancy. That kind of came up actually tonight, right? With, you know, an inn might want to be able to have work, like their employee housing, but they were, because in a certain zone, mixed use, required to have only year-round occupancy and not allowed to have seasonal occupancy. So should it follow basically the use of the property or the zoning district? So this draft, these amendments give that a little more flexibility. It could be based on use of the established principal use of the property versus just what zoning district it is within. There's some minimum floor area that had been that's in the current ordinance. So maybe just referencing, because it talked about minimum for 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom. I wasn't sure what a 3rd bedroom minimum floor area should be, but maybe just referencing state law as far as like the codes instead of establishing minimums. To the dwelling units must not exceed dimensional standards for the established, except for accessory structures within their zoning district. This brought up about how the size is somewhat controlled based on those dimensional standards such as height, right? So it's a lower height than the main house. So, and then I see number 4 here, relief from living floor area maximum and number of bedrooms can be granted by a special use permit, subject to a finding that the development is consistent with the purpose of this section and the scale, use, and siting of the proposed dwelling unit is harmonious with the surrounding land use and development pattern. A maximum of 1,500 square feet of living floor area may be granted with a special use permit. A maximum of 1,800 square feet of living floor area may be granted with a special use permit if the unit, was created. It's an existing structure prior to the adoption of this ordinance. So that was something we had talked about at the last meeting.
So existing structure is the 1800.
And then there was also some recommendation about giving some flexibility in the building lot coverage, 1% bonus. So if for some reason, if you had wanted to create a 513 and you are close to or exceeding that coverage, giving someone, a property owner, an extra 1% in building lot coverage above the maximum established by the zoning district if it's provided for the creation of an accessory apartment. I did put 4 lots less than 120,000 square feet in lot area, because I thought those might be the ones where it's an issue, but we could just discuss that. I figured.
But we talked about giving that bonus going forward,
Mhm.
but then it has to, did we talk about
Yeah.
restricting that on the property, not on the.
Yeah, I know there was conversations to, well, if you're gonna get that bonus,
It's gotta be perpetuity.
how to craft that,
Yeah.
and then there
That's
was,
probably for Bill.
yeah, in perpetuity. I would want him to weigh in on that, because it would be like a zoning violation. I know he was part of the conversation last month, and like you could be in violation of zoning if you tried to, or there were some potential penalties.
Right.
But we can speak with him again if we want to make sure that that's clear in the ordinance itself
If it's
explicitly.
abandoned, there should be,
Abandoned, yeah. We can spell it out here.
yes,
Okay.
if it's legal.
But I thought our intent was not to prevent abandonment, period. Okay, what's the-
I'm in favor of either, like whichever's legally sound. If you can,
But when you say deed restrict, you mean
I
like
mean, if it's,
in regards to, if it's deed restricted, you mean for the income eligible persons deed restricted, or deed restricted meaning it, what would the
it
deed
can't be
restricted be?
converted into a garage
Yeah,
after the 1% bonus. 10 years from now.
right.
I mean, we would want to make sure that when, if the property changes hands, that it doesn't get abandoned. We don't have a lose the 513 because the new owner doesn't want to do it.
Yep. Okay, we can work on the language for that.
Dan's got something too.
I just wanted, yeah, I think we might need to have Bill weigh in on that too, because deed restrictions are only enforceable civilly. But I don't know what it is when you're dealing with a town having a restriction. So we just might need to weigh in on that a little bit.
Okay, good point, thinking that correctly. Thank you.
But at least for tonight, if we could get some consensus on the, are we going the right direction with the policies? Like, I think, I just want to get it on paper for you to start looking at, and then if the planning board likes the policies, we can then refine the language, so it's in the good condition for you to act on next
I have
time.
one quick question. At the very beginning, it talks about, before I think it was, talking about creating housing opportunities, for the primary resident, to opportunities for supplemental income. Then it goes on, the purpose is to create seasonal workforce housing to support local businesses. I thought it was not seasonal workforce we're working on, it is year round. And that confused me, because then you go to page 5, and it says persons resident of town year round, which you find in chapter 2.
So,
I'm confused.
yeah, so within, if you see within this, so right after, all right, so we're right here on the 1% bonus there for building lot coverage. The next section, current section E, standards for commercial zones.
Okay,
So this is where currently within Service Commercial, Old Harbor Commercial, and New Harbor Commercial, those 3 zoning districts currently is where a section 513 accessory
Okay.
apartment can be utilized for a seasonal employee.
so.
So that is
then
part
you
of
should
it.
say that this is housing opportunities for year-round residents and also seasonal workforces in business districts. Something that just makes it clear, it sounds like that we're saying one thing in the first sentence and something else in the second sentence. So
Yeah.
I think we just need to make it clear that in different zones, it is supporting.
So in the appropriate zone. That's the second
But
sentence.
whatever's the right word, make sure that I don't think they're in conflict. right above, like.
We can go back to the current section, I mean, the current so within the current purpose, it says, this purpose is intended, this section is intended to provide year-round rental housing for year-round residents, seasonal rental housing for those deriving income from employment on the island, and at the same time provide supplemental income for homeowners from the rental of accessory apartments. So and then it says, and to provide property tax incentives for accessory apartments to be voluntary deed restricted. So we did need to clean it up if we were to eliminate that deed restriction section. But I also felt like it wasn't, I separated it out because sometimes the section 513s are for on a business property and not necessarily homeowners.
That's why I say.
Yeah, so that's why.
Depending on the zone you're in, it could be seasonal, for
Yep.
seasonal workers, or it could be for a year-round resident, but it would depend on the zone.
Or
It
the
doesn't
use,
sound like it's-
unless we amend it to be the use too, but
Okay, it just,
I'll clarify that, so
we'll think about that.
Yeah. I'll make sure it's clear, yeah.
Okay, where are we now, page 6?
Section, yeah, so the standards for commercial zones and properties, so potentially adding that to say, or for lots with an established principal use of commercial. And one of the issues that had come up in the past, the zoning board wasn't clear on the number of 513s allowed within the commercial zones on a commercial lot. So, because it alluded to there being more than one. It says a separate affidavit shall be required for each accessory apartment. So, but there currently is no set maximums that the other section clearly identifies, the two potential dwelling units. So you would have a main house and one accessory apartment. So you can add in, there shall be a maximum of 2 accessory apartments per lot within, if you wish. I'm just adding that as an option, so it's clear. I don't know if you want to limit it, but right now it's not clear. There could be 10 accessory.
Yeah, we
513
need to limit. I don't know whether
Yeah,
2 is the right number, or 10, I think it might be, but we definitely need to limit, because somebody would, as an unintended consequence, would push the envelope to as many units as he or she could do.
I'm just confused, push what envelope though, if you're in that, you're not getting any more lot coverage. Are you? Like, what's the envelope that they're pushing? That's my question.
It's for 513.
I mean, it's
For 513.
it's a 513 in the commercial district. What envelopes get pushed?
The restrictions of the 13, that the amount one can have.
Frederick, why are we limiting it? I think is your question.
Yeah, I mean, if it's limited by lot coverage, right? So if you have a lot coverage in commercial zoning, you can actually put 3, why would we want to limit it?
it's a policy
In a commercial
decision.
zone,
Yeah.
Where it's already
Yeah.
dense.
It's already very dense.
And that's why I want to, I'm not clear on what.
As I said, I wasn't sure too. We need to limit, I'm not sure 2 is the right number. We do need to have a limit.
Is the height allow height different in the commercial zone as well?
Yeah, there's
Yes.
different maximums based for each of the different districts. Yeah.
So,
But it's commercial is a little, I don't know if they limit the accessory building heights. The question, I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't think it is.
we have that in here. So.
Yeah.
Oh, you know what? Maybe I did just put, in
'cause
the
I'm
memo, I
thinking
just listed a few, not the commercial
You might
districts.
not be able to go, like in the commercial zone. You might be able to go up, instead of.
Regular buildings are sort of based on the surroundings, but we find that to be completely random too. Like Hendrickson House is, just for lack of, I don't know what the height is, but it's like 50 feet in the house I own next to it, or own next to it is 25.
Right.
But so, but because
But I
the other
guess,
side over
so,
there
all right,
was-
so let's use that as an example. Is that allowed, are you, or that piece of property that We had a lot of fill up,
I would assume so,
and it's so,
yeah. Or could the accessory building, if they build one, be higher than the house?
I'm just asking, I'm just kind of curious what envelope.
Well, the other,
I understand in the residential thing, but in the areas that are already dense or might have existing buildings that someone can put 3 accessory apartments in, 513 apartments, year-round housing, whatever.
Or they could build a building and use it for rental,
Right.
nightly room rental, if they can already
Well, that's
construct the building.
Right.
Yeah.
Why would we restrict the
then-
number of people?
But then you want to make
who
sure
use-
you don't get into be classified as an inn or a hotel, which has other sets of regulations.
Right.
So
I have one question that's more semantics for number one, is should be using the word apartment? It says there should be a maximum of 2 accessory apartments per lot.
that's the title of the section. So you mean change the whole,
The word.
the word apartment?
I'm not sure, because sometimes there,
That's an interesting thought.
I don't know.
There's not necessarily always an apartment.
Hmm.
They're not always necessarily always an apartment.
They're often a standalone building.
Right.
A lot of times you see the term ADUs, like accessory dwelling units, like that's
Yeah.
kind of the common
Okay.
term, but
Maybe that's what we need to use.
You know, I can't help, and this is going off topic just a little bit, I can't help but be concerned. At what point do we call in the water company and say, how many more houses can we build? And, you know what I'm saying?
That goes by zone too.
You know, I mean, if we're making a recommendation of potentially unlimited number of accessory dwellings in commercial zones, how will that affect the water department? Don't we want their input?
Well, I think yes, is the answer to that, is when, I don't know how long ago it was, but it was identified that there were 4 lots in the downtown district that actually put more rooms on, that were big enough for that, very number of. I don't know exactly where they are. I think this came up with
Water.
the Lark Hotel discussion. And how many more rooms does that mean in impact to water use? And that, it just, I don't know where that discussion went.
And you're using the word room, and we're really talking about an apartment of some kind. So we've got to be, again, gotta be careful that we
Well-
don't start getting into hotels and so forth.
Well, what I'm saying about the rooms though is if someone wanted, they can legally put 8 more rooms on a property. Why can't we require that? More of those rooms be, more of those rooms. Units be 513s.
Right. That's great. thought.
The hotel rooms would not have cooking facilities, I believe the 513 does.
It
So
does.
that would be one of your issues right there, you would not be able to have cooking facilities.
It can be restricted, yeah.
If you're following the rules for example, for construction of additional rooms for a hotel, as we did with Clark, you cannot have cooking facilities.
Correct. But if we had it so that the hotel owner applies, say the hotel, hypothetically, 7 applies for 8 rooms, and you say, okay, you can have 6. With 2, you can have 8, but 2 of them have to be for affordable housing or year round or what have you. Not a room, but an apartment.
You're talking, again, you're talking about 8 rooms, but we're talking about mixing apartments and rooms.
Well, we just approved 585 each out.
Yeah.
Which has 2 accessory apartments.
Exactly, that's perfect.
And
But
as well as rooms.
And we're doing them for 5.
But they don't have more than the 10 for their annual qualification. If they gone to 11, they could have a different set of rules.
And I
But
guess,
they are exceeding their amount of kitchens that they're allowed. So,
Hey, that's a mixed use zone, the answer is
Yes,
they can have a kitchen,
One for 20,000.
one per 513 unit.
Well, you're allowed 1 kitchen per 20,000 square feet, and they're gonna have a kitchen in the main building and 2 in the back, because they're getting 2 513s. So we're allowing for 3 kitchens, even though we're not, the
They
zone
are,
doesn't allow it.
yeah, but it's in 2 separate buildings.
Yeah, it's,
So there's
it's
not.
allowed, it's a permitted
Yeah,
use.
there is a-
Accessory 513s are permitted by right use and they have a kitchen in them, so. Are you saying it's in violation of zoning?
No, I wasn't
Oh,
sure.
okay.
I wasn't sure, yeah.
Like, brought that up a couple meetings ago. No, I think we're okay there, yeah.
The idea is has to have 10 rooms. And then you go to the other building, which has a 513 or. So it's.
So back to I think we started talking about having, whether or not there should be a maximum number of 513s in a commercial property. So there seems to be some inconsistency, but I guess going back to, if we're allowing 3-bedroom units now, so 2, I mean, is it likely that a property owner, business owner is going to want to build more than 2 kitchens on one lot for employee housing units? Because we're talking about 6 bedrooms now.
You know, being able to convert certain things into it.
And we were talking about this today, in the residential zone, we have a property owner who wrote us about wanting 2 513s, which I'd love to see language added to this while we're talking about it. But both commercial and residential zones, maybe with special use permits, should be allowed to have more than one. Because, for instance, this person has a main house with 4 bedrooms, there's a cottage with 2 bedrooms, they were just granted approval to have a 3rd bedroom, and they have a garage with living quarters above. And they've come to us asking if they can have 2 513s, and we still haven't been able to respond. And I don't think, unless I overlooked it, we're addressing it here, and maybe we should be. But it could be a special use permit when there are 3 buildings already there. We've already been able to grant them a 3rd bedroom in what was the 2-bedroom 513. And they have the garage with the other, so there's bodies in each of those buildings already. And that owner wants to be able to put year-round people in 2 of those buildings, one of which used to be that way until they just started refurbishing or renovating to add the 3rd bedroom. But I wasn't sure, I didn't see it in here whether we're discussing that. I think we should be, because we have an applicant who has employees who do live here, who wants to house them, who wants to give 513 housing, but we're not addressing it.
Didn't we discuss that? I don't think you were here, right? We discussed allowing 2, didn't we?
We've discussed it.
We had 2 by right and a 3rd by special use permit.
Oh, okay.
So
Oh, no.
it's in there, that's in there, it's in there.
Okay, good, sorry.
No,
It's not in this draft.
No.
It's what we were
We
talking.
did discuss it, though, yeah. I think we agreed that to move forward with that.
So is
The
there-
lot coverage is-
okay, sorry.
I mean, if it had allowed lot coverage.
Okay, good, I wasn't here and I didn't see it in here, so.
I didn't put it in.
Here will end up being part of the.
So is there a consensus of the board to allow, so right now, it's 2 dwelling units, meaning you have your main, because this is again an accessory use, so there'll be a maximum of 2 total. So do you want to allow more than 1 513 on a residential property by special use permit?
By special use permit.
And do you want to set a maximum of 2 then? I mean, or just exceeding it?
We have to set a limit. I would pick 2, but I mean, I could be,
Okay, so we can add that.
just remember the neighbors around, we don't want to overwhelm them with additional people. I think
Yeah,
having 513
noise.
is great, but I think we need to limit it to 2.
And properties turn over, so,
People that you're talking about. When you start getting 3 or more, you start getting a whole compound, and that's gonna impact on the neighbors with noise and other assorted things, and that's not what we want to do.
I don't mean to beat a dead horse, but the buildings are already being occupied.
That's fine.
So, but I mean, when we discuss that, we're
So they would.
we're overwhelming neighbors, the buildings already have the bodies in them. So the neighbors are
Yeah,
already.
you were talking about one specific instance. I'm looking at
Yeah.
what we can do
Yeah.
throughout that.
Okay.
So,
Gotcha.
yeah, we may not want 150 incidents of that.
That's why we also, there was a modification for new construction limited to 15, but existing buildings, 1,800.
Right.
And then,
Yeah, I saw that.
and so this is existing, you know, as opposed to something else being, more being created.
Okay.
I think it's two different things, because you have, yeah, it already exists, it's already, like, you're not bought on a piece of property that doesn't exist.
Okay.
And it would be, I
And I
think the
think
two new ones would be limited to 15.
And I think by special use is super important, because then we're able to review the application, we're review the property, neighbors can weigh in.
We get neighbors to come in and comment, because they find that the noise is a factor, or sharing roads is a problem. Maybe wells in that area are a problem. I mean, I can see a number of issues that the board would have to look at.
Or they may feel that it's.
And maybe they think it's wonderful, and that's fine. But you need the neighbors need the right to come in and weigh in on whatever concerns they have.
So, two are accepted, three with a special use.
Well, no, one in
One
residential,
by right.
one, are you talking about two,
Yeah.
two what? Two dwelling, or,
Accessory dwellings. I
Yeah.
think it's important to have the word accessory so that no one can ever misconstrue dwelling to be an invitation to then turn their properties into condominiums and sell a dwelling. If it's an accessory, you can't sell an accessory separate from an yes.
Yes.
So you want to keep that term
Right.
accessory in every unit.
So one is accessory permissible by right, two by an SUV.
Right.
and then what about commercial districts? Do you want to have something different?
If you want to do in a commercial district, go to three, I would.
Two by right, special use
By right,
permit to
and-
exceed that?
Yeah, and a third by a special use permit.
Okay,
Because you would want to review each case.
You want to review, in fact, if you're worried about having two in the commercial district, we
Yeah.
can do one by right and, either a second
What
or a
about more
third.
than one by special? Just put more than one.
I want to put a limit on how many,
But I don't.
because it'll come back to
I
bite you.
can't put a limit, I can't put a limit about something, I can't limit it if, I don't know what envelope is gonna get pushed, I understand it in the residential zone, I don't understand it in the commercial zone.
Because again, you're gonna have problems with parking, you're gonna have problems with water, you will have problems, major problems with noise downtown. Those are just three I can think of off the top of my head.
So,
Safety.
so a bed and breakfast or
Right.
again, let's pick any hotel down there, wants to convert three, they wanted to convert 6 of their hotel rooms into 3 accessory apartments for staff, year-round staff.
Okay.
Why can't we consider
We can consider that, maybe you need to come to us with.
that? Well, that's what we just said.
That's what
Anything more than one, but if you limit it to 2, you won't get that application.
but again, it's an accessory use, so you can't have a property with just accessory 513.
Right.
Right.
So we would need to have the
The only
in
reason
and
I bring it up is
then,
that so you gotta think outside the box in some of these areas.
Yeah.
And it's to create,
Well, the other thing is, I don't see just going from dollars and cents. I suspect that they would not give up, 4 to 6 rooms, at the prices that are charged down here to put it in accessory.
Well,
Until they don't have a place for employees.
They'll buy something outside that's
You can't
cheaper
have-
downtown.
you can't have those rooms if you don't have someplace to put the people that have to run the place. And that's a consideration that everybody out here that's in business. considers.
So if you move in small steps for, the business zone, more than one, but with a special use.
With a limit of some, of maximum. because
we've
somebody-
seen a couple properties do 2 513s.
You're fired, Gail.
Okay, so how about
So-
that for now?
By right, you could do 2, or you want to go back to 1, because we've already allowed a couple 2.
I think we could do 2 by right and
Yeah.
a third one by special use permit.
Is that a consensus of the board? You want, or you want to, except for
I'll
Chris
limit it.
and Gail want to allow a special use permit for more than 3?
Yeah,
It is, it's more,
because I don't know what, like, I'm just trying to think of an example in downtown or in commercial zone that, I don't know, like, when you put these things out here, people get creative. But I also don't want to take consequences.
Chris, right.
Well, let's start with that. I mean, we are
Yeah.
gonna look at this again next,
It's-
in the next
right.
several months.
Think it over.
Yeah, we'll look
Yeah.
at this several times so that we can move on.
Yeah,
We've got about 45 more minutes.
all right.
there anything else we have to look at in 513? Or is that pretty much it?
Those were the key changes. Oh, I mean, I brought this up last month, but I did include Nantucket's. Did everyone have a chance to review that?
I
And
like the accessory dwelling, located within an owner occupied building, exterior architect design and use of accessory dwelling shall be harmonious with the appearance and use of the structure of the owner's home. I think that's a lot, it's a lot.
I wanted to ask about the tiny home house
Yeah.
unit,
yeah,
you know, the movable trailer part, and I mean, how does that work? You get attached with something on wheels to a foundation? What is, what is that?
You bring it to the foundation on to be.
I mean, well, what, yeah.
a movable trailer.
I understand that section either.
Sometimes they may have,
Brought it up and I was like, yeah, you're right.
Because that's.
it's in, on Nantucket, yeah, so I don't know what, we'd have to look at state law in Rhode Island, but that's obviously a big hot thing, right? Like across the country, tiny homes.
Oh,
I left it in there for, you to look at an example from another community, if it's something to
Well, I would-
consider. It's been brought up here too.
I wouldn't doubt, I mean, you could order these things.
Yeah.
As long as it meets code.
I just-
The garage on, you know, like those, I think it would have to be code, and whether or not there's wheels there or not, it has to be a hurricane type, right?
Yeah,
It's gotta be on a foundation of some sort.
yeah. In
So,
other words, the wheels have to be removed.
yeah,
I mean, have to be put on wheels or.
Yeah,
I mean, I just saw that briefly, you know.
I don't know what the code is in Mass either. I don't know what the-
We
Yeah,
might,
So-
put some moving stuff on for another month, have some more information, because it is an intriguing idea, but we also have very nasty hurricanes out. Yeah.
Yeah, just people won't go that further step to put it on a structure. It's not really.
I've been in Florida after a hurricane, and I saw what happened to a lot of the trailers.
So I think maybe we should incorporate that part of that language, like moved off the trail and front on and secured.
If we decide to include it, and I know
Yeah, we decided.
if we decide to include it.
Right.
I'd like some more information maybe for next time around.
So you have to be out of here when and what's?
6:30.
6.
Oh, well, 6:15.
6:15, and I'm sure that.
Yeah, okay. This gives, I think this gives Allison enough information to give us another draft for,
July.
13.
Yeah.
So let's move on to the next one, which would be 519, I think. Yeah.
Chris is here, yeah.
19.
Oh, no, this is, I did not work on this. This is,
Right.
Chris Warfel submitted this.
Right.
Wait, you wrote in your email that the town. of
All the sides.
19.
Yes.
Yes, yes, so.
I actually.
Hi.
Okay. All right, let's take a look at, the 5, section 519. Chris, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, this line, there were mistakes. So I would just like to highlight, there's only one here, that you might want to edit on D7, 8, whatever it was for the first word should be A at 5 or 7, and A at R or 8.
Okay, repeat those again.
Yeah, sorry.
It's all right, not that fast.
D7, the first word should be AFFI,
Okay,
and DH should be AFFR. Oh, word replaced is not, search replace is not. On page 3 at the very top, it says AAH on the second sentence. That should be AFFH.
Well, mine says AF.
mine says AFH, I just crossed it out, but that's what it says.
In the second one?
Yeah,
But how about in the first line where you write two persons resident in town year round? I think you meant residing with ing, first line.
I think what I printed is the main one.
But that's okay. I don't think we need to worry about this.
Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't want you to
Yeah.
be confused by my mistakes, so I.
I'm interested in the concept.
Okay, so the concept is that this would follow very much to attainable housing approach. The difference being that affordable housing is thought to have lower rental allowances because of the income of the people is less. And how, and for the homeowner, property owner, developing affordable housing, the idea would be to give them more incentives than would be possible under attainable housing. So attainable housing, the income is greater to the property owner because they can charge more. On affordable housing, they cannot charge as much because affordable housing income is less, and by definition, they're not going to be less. But in exchange for that, they would receive town-based incentives. And that would be whatever the town can do to incentivize, which normally is tax policy. And as Keith was talking about, providing grant funds or some kind of funding, low cost or just straight out grant funds to develop affordable housing. I think the concept very similar approaches probably, however, the difference being the benefit being charged and the incentives that the town would encourage or provide. So a lot of this follows your five things. 5%. And it's a lot of it is extremely similar. And then my big concern was that what I heard the 513 previous discussion is that people develop this type of housing and so trying to figure out what is a reasonable time period once the affordable housing unit is created. What is the affordable timeline for that to remain as such? And I put it into a formula and I picked a number of 15 for 15 years. And if somebody uses grant funds or low-cost loans and goes for the full 15 years, they're fine. If they go shorter, less than 15 years, then they have to pay back a certain percentage of those funds.
Yeah, that's.
Can I have a question while you're on that? I don't disagree with the concept, but the penalty, just from an economics perspective. You're gonna give me 100 grand, that's gonna cost me 5% of the bank, but you're only gonna penalize me 3%. I'll do it. Right? They're fine, like, so, that's this, like, that should be simple, that, I mean, that's someone that's looking at this, gonna be like, it's free money. All right, I gotta make more of that, you know,
Like a parking ticket, yeah.
you know, so I guess my point is CPI might be the wrong, I don't know if it's a required index, but it might be the wrong index, meaning, and something along the lines of whatever, interest rate plus X is more appropriate for a buyout or a tenancy. I know I didn't, you know, CPIs in the, you know, affordable homes, CPI is part of the index they use to adjust the worth, the value over time. Among other things, that's fine for value, but I don't think it's fine for opting out, especially if they're getting a tax rate or whatever incentive. I think the penalty should be, yes, calculated accordingly.
I also have a question about the penalty, and maybe I misread it, but please correct me. Here's a hypothetical. I'm selling my house, I have a 519, I sold it 10 years ago. I'm selling the house tomorrow. The buyer buys it with the understanding that he has to hold on to that 519 for another 5 years if he doesn't want to pay a penalty. But let's say that the buyer says, no, I don't want to hold on to it. Who will pay the penalty? The seller who benefited for 10 years? Or the buyer? Should he carry the burden?
I believe we should get the buyer to drop that terminate. Not the seller.
And it could be part of the negotiation,
To
right?
negotiate.
Yeah.
I think it's fair.
Well,
Well, then
who
they
actually
can
did the termination, and they have, it was the buyer that terminated it, so you can't go after the seller for an action that did not take. I
But the
feel-
seller profited financially and the buyer doesn't.
That's why it would be discussed between the buyer and the seller, and they can agree.
They could come up with which goes down, which goes then again to my basic premise from months ago when I said, people will not invest in these, other than the town might do it. But private landowners will not invest in this because they might lose out on the buyer.
I don't agree with that, and because we see it happening, well, not all the time, but we do see people developing this type of housing. We know that it's not to the degree that is needed, so people are doing it. What this is doing is giving it that incentive that didn't exist before. I think people would do it if they would receive some kind of tax rate, or grant. To do this are very low interest level.
So one thought, I mean, the timing of actually crafting zoning ordinance, because right now that's my main concern is this going to create units? And without that large financial incentive, I don't believe it would, because we have already had something similar on the books and it didn't create any deed restricted units. It's complicated for an individual property owner to figure all that out, navigate deed restrictions and monitoring and things. And the housing board could do it. But should the town first, decide we do want to establish a program and funds before actually crafting the language here? Because we don't want to adopt something for a program that doesn't exist. Like there's no funds right now.
Well, the town is working on a parallel path, I believe, for this, with a private partnership outreach. And I thought by the time that this becomes, how did they do that with it?
I think-
Plus the state funding.
I mean, this is a template for all intents and purposes, like this is something that.
To lay out, to help establish the program.
As the town moves forward and
Yeah.
the process moves forward, this is something that, it's something that no one else has. Chris already did the legwork for a lot of it, and I think a lot of it is out of the realm of possibility. Sure, the funding source definitely has to be identified.
But it would be
Or
nice to
whatever
have-
program, and then this can be tweaked according to
Okay, that's what I,
what it is. Like, I'm not looking at.
it's
The last
conceptual.
person who got something that doesn't, like, I don't like adopting things that can't be enforced. And that was, I think, what I brought up with the 513 to begin with, was the enforceability.
Yes.
Right.
And, we're not gonna, it can't be enforced.
And going back to the
Or
transition of, or the transaction of a property, one thought is to possibly, and I have to continue to think about this, and Jennifer, maybe you could continue to think about this too, is when you have a transaction, do you start the clock all over again? Maybe the clock starts ticking, that 15-year clock starts ticking when the property transfers. I'm not sure because I haven't thought about this enough yet, but you wonder if someone's gonna think, great, I'm gonna buy this because there's only 3 more years left on his 513. And I'll take the benefit for the 3 years, then I'm gonna use it for whatever I want to use it for. If you want to keep these going, maybe you keep that. If there's a transaction, you start the clock ticking again. Because I think some people would invest in a property even though that exists, especially when there are those tax advantages and what have you that are being discussed as part of this package.
I thought originally that this was gonna be a dynamic situation, that, you know, the affordable houses, whether attainable or sorry, would come and go. People would try it, would not like it, other people would say, yeah, I want to do that. So there would not be a static number. It would work around a little bit. So but I did not think of carrying starting the clock over again with a transfer of property.
Those details can be sussed out once the program actually. Can I ask a question about this? Does anybody know what's the threshold now for income level? What's the top income level to qualify for affordable? I thought it was somewhere around 85.
I don't know the answer to that.
That was
The
one,
answer is it depends.
On house
So
size,
it depends
yeah, I
what you're
mean-
measuring. If you're measuring, for example, for the statewide survey of affordability, that is 120% of median.
For that area that you live
Right.
in. And what's our median?
Depending on how many people you have in your family, you know, the rough number is 66.
But it's also different from home ownership
Right.
versus rental.
That's why I
rentals,
said it depends. on-
And
what is the thought on, so it's 80% for rental, but that's the count on the low and moderate income housing chart. Is that what the intent here? Do you have a maximum, like a thought as to how high to go? Like, do you want to go higher than that 80% to have more eligible residents?
I thought the town was working with the state on increasing that.
Well, 120 to 140.
Yeah.
And the town does create, the housing board has created up to 140% AMI housing units, because that does serve a need locally, and even though they're not counted on the housing chart, it's still creating a unit that's serving a housing need. I don't know how rentals, I guess that's a question, what would be the highest
the reason
deed
I asked is I'm
restriction?
trying to wrap my head around what's your end, like people keep saying a homeowner doesn't want, like, wouldn't be incentivized to do that because they're not making money on it. All right, but what if there's an existing structure that they can utilize this program with a little bit of help from the town, whatever program you create? And what's the dollar amount that they're gonna be collecting in rent, because I don't think it's insignificant. And they're probably pays your taxes on the property, maintains the building, and they're helping give a year-round place to someone. So that's why I'm asking, I don't know what that income level is, I want a number, so I can clear my head on
Mhm.
what it is. We're saying 33% of AFF5, let's say AFF5, that depends, okay? Well, does it depend? And it sounds like it's a complicated formula. And if it's an existing unit, like, let's say Dale brought up a property owner that has 2 potential accessory units on that property, and one, they they wanted to renovate one to turn into something that would qualify under 519. And.
Yes,
And
but, you know, point.
program that the town.
I argued throughout the papers that the zoning board.
Subsidized percent of that, or 50% of that renovation, is it feasible for them to recoup that other 50% over the next 5 years or 10 years? I don't know, I just have to see
Yeah.
I gotta have some hypotheticals. I mean, I'm not dissing anything, I'm like concept, but, I keep hearing, oh, well, developers don't wanna do this, or and I'm like, no, that's not true. Or the comment is they don't wanna, or it would have already been utilized. Well, human nature is to take the path of least resistance. And if there's a little help, then I think those 513 laws, like nobody could explain to me what those tax incentives were, no one could explain to me.
I didn't even know they existed.
So we can't say that it wasn't successful because it wasn't utilized. When I don't think a lot of people, I didn't know it was there. Until I read it, when we started this whole discussion, and I don't even know what the math is behind it. Like, what were the incentives, and is how laborious is the process, and is that something that the town can help with, or, those are a lot of things that probably would have helped, for the success of that particular section of 513, but this is.
So what is it that we can do
I was gonna say,
now?
what's the next, where are we going from here?
Yeah,
The AFFI seems to be very important, and it seems like it's gonna be a function of the number of people that in it. So maybe there's a multi-tiered approach to AFFI, and I believe if you take federal or state money, you're probably going to have to work with their guidelines.
So that's how sort of called
Yeah.
housing groups, right? So the structure already exists.
Right, there is data out, there are numbers out there for how to define this, but I should do that. I should.
So for 80% right now, for New Shoreham, 80% area median income is for one person would be 52,550. And then, as you say, it goes up for two people, about 60,000, three people, 67.5, four people, 75,000 annual income there.
And so based on that annual income, this model is 33% of that.
The rent.
The rent?
The rent would be 33% because that is basically what is recommended to be your maximum amount for mortgage or rent, a short percentage.
We can get those figures. It's an established, Rhode Island Housing has the maximum rentals based on those, so we can collect that and have that. Yeah, that's helpful, because you want to know that, you want to understand.
Question.
It's not really a question, it's a comment, and I think maybe Keith would know, but it's not New Shoreham's AMI purely
Yeah.
because they threw us
It's county.
in the group.
Yeah.
When they were talking about that new legislation that included Westerly,
Yes.
so.
Oh,
Yeah,
It's
so,
a real
so-
problem.
yeah, so you can't just look at those. New
Well,
Shoreham.
I know, it's a federal boundary that includes
Right.
several communities in Rhode Island. And for New Shoreham, those are the figures, but those aren't local figures. Those figures apply to New Shoreham, but they are an average of several communities in Rhode Island.
Which is part of the problem.
Yeah.
Which is part of the problem. Of why we-
So the number, when you were saying 52,000, you meant that was including like the Westerly.
This is the FMA, what is it called?
This is our census.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those are the figures. That's that table. I just pulled up the survey that was sent out, the housing needs survey, because that table was inserted within that to collect the number of residents qualifying in each of those.
So I'm trying to figure out what's in the current term. Well, there's a public hearing scheduled for Wednesday, July 20th. So Chris can bring this back to us for the July meeting, because that will be a week or so before you actually take a look at it, make some suggestions. Please.
Or do you want,
On it, and Allison, maybe you have some thoughts.
or do you want to get, I mean, because again, this is more, we're not really going to finalize the language here.
Well, you
We're
can't
talking about
finalize
getting the-
language until there's a program.
Right, so I don't know what more there is. Do you go to the council and first and then make sure, I don't know, to get feedback from them before
First
the.
question will be the same with the council, right? You're talking about a program where we have no underlying ordinance.
Yeah.
So I mean, my preference
Yeah.
would be that you do something along these lines so that we have a construct and we can have a conversation about solving at least a small part of the problem.
We
Maybe
can,
something like this. If people don't use it, that's fine. But one of the things that worries me is, we go through this, I've proposed this thing, a few months ago. But we don't have a structure. There seems to be some sense that it at least might be interesting to do a grant program for people who, I actually think about this as killing more than more than one bird with this stone. I mean, we have older folks who are land rich and cash poor, who need caretakers, who want to age. You know, like there's a lot of potential benefit that can come from this, but we don't have the construct of the program.
I can tell you from that survey that we did, I got the results out, I think I sent them a very post. There was a pretty big support for town managed housing authority. I was surprised, but I mean, it was not close. So maybe the council,
This is, the idea that we're gonna solve this in a year with a silver bullet, I mean, none of us believes that. This is gonna be one potential solution. You know, and half a dozen people think this is a good idea, or 3 people. Whatever.
it's one arrow.
Yeah.
So how about for our next meeting, the planning board, like, as far as the council might want your recommendations or thoughts, is that, like, we could come up with,
Yeah.
we could draft some, or I could draft a recommendation and some of the comments you've talked about tonight, and then
Okay.
next month, if there's additional comments.
Yeah.
And then to send to the council. You said there's a hearing on it in the end of July.
Yeah.
July 20.
Can I just come up with
Yeah.
one comment that I want to make about this? I agree with you, Chris. The clawback provisions can give you a headache. And when I envision this for its work, if we're going to do a grant program, I think it ought to be a straight clawback. You know, after a certain number of years, if you're going to retire this affordable 513, on a sliding scale of 10% a year for the next 10 years, you write a check to the town.
Yeah.
Particularly if it's grant funded. You know, I mean, if it's, we're providing loan financing, maybe that gets more complicated. But to me, the simpler,
The simpler the
more
better.
creative and lets us be the better.
One comment, Chris, the last section, that handicap accessible apartments, just strike that whole thing from, just strike it off. It's that section is now, it's in a different section of the zoning ordinance. The state requires, those are allowed by right, not by special use permit. Yeah, so just get rid of it. Yeah, that several years ago, that was removed. State law requires that those type of dwelling units are allowed by right, not by special use permit. It's been addressed. It's in another section. So
One other, the speaker is very hot on these accessory dwelling. We may have a different statute. Governing these things statewide come the end of the session. So I mean, I think we should pay attention to that too. I don't know exactly what is considered, but like the linchpin of his housing, one of the linchpins of his sort of housing agenda is making, it is really focused on these accessory dwelling.
because most communities don't allow them. So, I mean, New Shore is way beyond where any community is with allowing this type of housing unit. So I don't think anything they do would impact our regulations, but we will keep an eye on it.
I'm getting stressed out just thinking about all this, but like if I was someone to do this, I would only be able to afford it with help. But then if you get to a point where you can't afford it and you can't get the handyman there or the plumber there, the electrician there to keep up on this 15-year lease, like where are you left then? If you don't have the good tenant, like I'm kind of thinking like, should there be a process where you're allowed to come back to the board and say, my husband died, I can't afford this, or like all these different circumstances that we do for special use permits for houses, like, can you come back and say, my circumstances completely changed. I have cancer, my kid died, I lost my job, I broke my leg, whatever it is, like, I would love to be able to do this, but I can't get a plumber to my house now. So like these kind of things. So is that what you're talking about with the town housing authority? Would that be someone that could come and help with this? I mean, I don't know, maybe all my brain is like.
The housing authority is town or managed process.
No, but we were talking about this also in the office one day, just about the regular 5-1. Not the regular 5-1 agrees, the one that's deed restriction with the extra percentage. So, like, what if it's winter time, you have a 3-bedroom apartment, nobody wants to rent it. So are you allowed to like have a period where you can have a vacant to either look for a suitable tenant or make repairs? You know, it's the little details like that. I mean, because I have an apartment and it does sometimes, it takes time between tenants to do something, to get it fixed and make it whatever. It also can really take some time to find a good suitable tenant. Especially if you have, say, a bachelor pad and one room opens up and you have to find a compatible person. There are, you know, maybe there should be some grace period before you penalize.
I thought of that too, and I thought that there ought to be a legal or legitimate waiting list of potential applicants for an apartment, so that when you come to the town hall and say, listen, I've gone through all these applicants, they're not interested in my apartment. Are you not going to penalize me because it's not being used?
You also have a reverse kind of situation where there might be the only people that want to live in your apartment are not acceptable to you for one reason or another. And I won't specify one, but I'm sure anybody can imagine that, you know, there are some obviously less than savory people anywhere you go. So,
Or habits, or
right,
situations.
maybe the only people have 3 dogs, and you don't want somebody with 3 dogs, or, you know.
Right, so you would assign somebody to oversee their policies, you would assign a.
I was more,
But then
yeah,
that gets to be, what if you're forcing somebody, say, on me, that, like, almost raped me 15 years ago.
Well, that's what they would oversee, of course, they would
Well,
allow it, so.
Well, I think you've given Chris some ideas to work with over the next couple of years.
So,
Yeah, why don't you address that one?
sorry.
You wanted a conversation.
So, because we only have about 20 minutes left, let's move on to the large houses and thank you, Chris, for us.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chris. Okay.
Is your vote at 6:30 or 6?
Allison,
Okay,
large houses, it's all yours until you have to leave.
okay.
From large. Yes, they're.
Tiny, small.
Interesting.
Large, okay. Okay, so last meeting, we talked about, and we've discussed this concept of whether or not the house size could or should be based upon or related to the lot size, whether you want to allow larger houses on larger size lots. I know in the past, when we've seen applications, sometimes that's a factor the board, you know, has considered when saying, you know, approving, advising in a positive way on an application. So Margie had said last month to try to put some language together. So of course, nothing's as simple as I started doing so, and then you're looking at and using the example from Martha's Vineyard community there. Once you start creating those ratios, right, within lot size, living floor area, then within New Shore's ordinance, a lot of communities just have that one threshold, right? That one factor in lot size. New Shore's has always had several. So you have like building volume, gross area, footprint, there's several different standards. So if you were to have this kind of ratio, then it seems like the other standards would then also need to have, for it to make sense, isn't right? So then I'm thinking this is getting, you know, that just seems very overly like too complex, right? I don't know, I was struggling with it. So then, do you then eliminate, just have that one size, one measurement for size versus having gross area, building volume, footprint also a factor? And then the question of whether or not it's, so there's the trigger, right, for a special use permit, and then there's your cap. So are the ratios for the cap or the triggering of the special use permit? So it was getting really complicated. So I did my best as a first, just plugging in some numbers, some ideas. And again, these are, the other complication is that New Shoreham has it just for the size of one individual structure versus cases use the lot, the total, like square footage of the lot. So.
Unlike a lot of places, we've got a lot of issues like wetlands and so forth, so we probably do need to keep that in mind.
And those tables help tame those multiple prohibited
Oh,
calculations.
are you talking about this table?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, this is really just a tool that we've used when getting input on our regulations and for when we're reviewing applications, but we can try to incorporate this within certainly within like an application form or maybe even the ordinance, but so here you can see there's so many different dimensions now that, you have your footprint, living floor area, gross area, building volume, building plane and wall plane measurements. So do we want to maintain all of these different factors in reviewing the size? Well,
I think that's super helpful, like, I don't have my PhD, but, if that's how I'm gonna get, I'll do it. I think those are so helpful. Where was that?
well, this is just in prior documents. This wasn't in like your, but I just, you've seen it a bunch of times. It's in the decision you just read tonight, like it's something that we've been using, but.
See, what I don't
But
want,
this
what I
is-
don't want to see happening is that we are so strict or concrete in our thinking that, especially at a special use permit level, I love the flexibility. So maybe you want a larger footprint because you want a lower height,
Yeah.
There should be some trade-off opportunities there so that people come up with something that is suitable for the land.
Right, and so, I mean, that was one thing, that has come up as an issue, so when considering that, I was proposing just eliminating that building footprint in excess of 2,000 square feet requiring a special use permit, because you have that cap already in the other sections. And then you also have size limiting factors, other type of, you still have your maximum living area, gross area, wall plane, building plane, so there's other ways of constructing it, so, I mean.
When we worked on this must have been probably 10 or 15 years ago. We were very careful to limit, for example, the one house for 75 feet, because we had gone around the island and there had been some houses constructed that went for much more than 75 feet with no breaks.
Mm.
And they really were not, shall we say, very attractive.
Yeah.
So I don't want to eliminate those because this was a way of helping people work on designing a house that is more aesthetically pleasing to look at, because you were having a jog or a porch or sliding glass doors, anything to break up the monotony of one long. The same thing we ran into with the long stone wall that was used as kind of a buffer below the house. There was one that was built that all you could see was this long stone wall, and everybody was furious.
Yeah.
And we said, okay, so that's why I got the limit on the stone walls. So there were reasons for these numbers that you're talking about.
Right, and that's why I don't want to, I feel like this has been an effective ordinance and I don't want to start tearing it apart, I guess is my concern. So I want to just maybe keep things more simple than, what are-
There were reasons why we did.
Yeah, so-
what we did.
I know, and it's been so long, it's like, well, why are we even, what were the problems? with it? Why are we? I mean, we have the recent the caps, right? There were some changes to those sections, 111, 514, reducing the caps, but then a sunset provision was put in. So we can, if you're happy with those caps, just strike the sunset and carry on, or do you want to change what was put in place last year?
The only change that I want is I want the flexibility in the footprint.
So if we eliminated that measurement, 2,000 square foot requires a special use permit, then you still have the maximum building footprint being 3,500 square feet prohibited above that. So do you need that trigger of a 2,000?
Where I think we made our mistake a few years ago is we gave way too much, building footprint for very, very large houses. That, I don't think we understood, the consequences of that, or we never would have done. So that I definitely, Mary, I hope.
So,
We did not do well on that.
but that was addressed with the recent amendments already, because it was
Yeah,
5,000 and it went down to 3,500. So keeping that in place, the maximum cap, but I think where sometimes the issue has been that 2,000 square feet footprint has been an issue for people wanting to build single family. I mean, single story, right? It's quite, it can be restrictive if you're trying to build a one,
Right.
for some people,
Keys
one.
to not have absolutes.
Because
Well,
I,
that's why it has to have,
Yeah.
you know, the parameters, but have it be subject to topography and, you know, to special use permits so that we can review the property itself and what the neighbors think and how it affects the view shed of people instead of going totally long.
Well, that's the opposite of what I was saying as far as, yeah.
Yeah.
And I'd like to avoid, pushing people into like saying, they got a large lot and, well, I can't build what I want, so I'm gonna subdivide and build two houses. And, I don't want,
That was my concern.
I don't want to go so far where they're like,
Mhm.
that's their own logic, you know what I mean? So if they have a large lot, if you could do a trade-off like, Sasha said about, you get a larger footprint, but you give up some height and you get more architecture to it.
Okay, you also have to reverse it. Say we okay a large house with a special use permit. They have it for 10 years, sell it to somebody else. Somebody says, oh, I've got all this wonderful land and I've already got my house, so I'm gonna go for subdivided. So then you end up with two houses.
So that house is built on an unsubdivided lot.
We have to make sure that that's in there somewhere.
Yeah,
It's
that
subdivided.
question came, I brought it up for Bill, and Bill said, because I told him I wasn't gonna support this, and he said that once that house is built on a larger lot, then that lot becomes the legal lot. You cannot subdivide.
For that house. And that's great, but I want to make sure that if there isn't another, couple of acres that was counted for building that we suddenly think they can subdivide out. It just needs to be clearly stated that, for example, with Hamilton, they're very clear in the decision that could not be subdivided in a later date and was put in conservation.
Same with the property on the north end, it was 10 acres.
Yeah.
They wanted to build a second house.
Conversations,
And just said the parameters.
Yeah, we build a house for, this is not 10 acres, it's very large, but because the building area is only requires 3 acres, we suddenly decided to be split off another 3 or 4 acres to build another house. But the reason you got that big house in the first place is because you had the 3 acres, and that would be all part of the decision. That has to be all part of this figure somehow. So you got it both ways.
All right, hold on a sec. All right, so but you're speaking of that, if a larger size home is allowed on a larger size lot, right?
Then it's
So-
gotta be-
So does, what
No
is,
longer being available for subdivision.
so does the planning board want to go in that direction of having larger houses on lot, like the concept, like I need to, like,
I
what's
think we have to
illustrated
have a
in
cap
here?
down which don't large houses.
Right, there has to be a cap,
Has to
but,
be a cap.
We have different.
Yeah, we've got a cap on there right now, which we may want to just keep, which is fine. But, I want to make sure that if we're going to give permission for somebody to build a larger house,
Larger than a cat.
the larger, well, up to the cap, but larger than we might normally have done otherwise based on our computations.
so I guess one thought I had when looking at this, so the cap right now is 4,500 square feet of living floor area. So if you have some sort of a ratio here,
Right.
then this is the ratio for if a special use permit is required, not for the cap, right? So the result of this is that you're not going to see larger homes on larger size lots. Like, you're not gonna review
So I'm
those.
confused. I mean,
Yeah.
the cap is the cap, you're not gonna run into conditions.
You won't you're less likely to review those type of applications. Because, I mean, it has to, like, where do you start? I mean, you can't, did you like this table?
No, I
I'm just, I don't know, I wasn't sure about this, because then it's like, how low do you go? It's like the,
I want to just throw something out there.
yeah,
You know, being that, I mean, well, we're on a small island, let's just think about it. How many real large lots are there left?
That's,
You know, what I mean? How many tiny lots are there out there for sale?
You have to take into account all the future potential tear downs.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's what's happening in this place. People buy a lot and come into us and tear down the house. We had one today that we're working with.
Can I ask that?
And
Someone tears down
So-
a house that's 5,500 square feet, why can't they put a house back up that's 5,500?
Right.
That's exactly.
I'm talking about buying up multiple lots that are adjacent.
they can merge them, yeah.
But then they
Yeah.
have to go through the whole process of moving the property line and everything out, and you know, making it into one lot, and that may not be allowed. So we could put a thing in there where you can allow to make a lot into a larger lot.
But Chris
make it a smaller lot.
But we might want to make it really large because then we only have one house built on there. If we live with three houses.
Chris's point is really important because you could have someone who wants to tear down a 5,500 square foot lot. And that, I mean, a house, and that 5,500 square foot house otherwise fits the 3%, 4% zoning criteria. So they are then just maybe go back to the 2,000 square foot footprint then, special use permit, and then we would review it and agree that they can put back what was there because it's in keeping with the properties,
So
right?
what's grandfathered in?
It's grandfathered, it may not be keeping with the neighborhood at all, but it would, but it
Just
might be.
the opportunity to make sure.
Right,
So then,
I like that.
to what I mentioned is maybe look at it, how many large lots are there left? You know, and is it really gonna have that big of an impact if it's, you know, how many large houses can really be built?
Can,
There are, I think for us, it's, a good point, though, but for us, we've seen that even if it's just one house in front of us, it does make it challenging for us to be respectful to the owner's desire to have a 35 or 55. And we're left, right, sort of trying to guide the owner into this table, which is really helpful. Because we also have to consider just the use that house will need, environmental, the use of water, the use of.
The environmental impact.
Yeah, the impact.
And a neighborhood where most of the houses are say are 2,500 to 3,000 square foot. You put a house in that's 5,500 square feet, it's going to be much bigger, it's not going to fit with the neighborhood. So that's something for us to consider also.
what's
It doesn't fit.
what are the restrictions on subdivided lot size?
So if you have 5.75 acres
You have to have 120,000 square feet to set it
to
up
subdivide,
per lot.
So that could potentially be into two, that size, right?
right now,
Yeah.
again, that's 4,000 square feet. I have 5.75 acres, but I can subdivide it into two and build what? 332.50 on each house? Right? What's that? But I want a 5,000 square foot house. Instead of two houses, I want one.
And that's
There's no process for that to be, is there a process for that to be presented, to be
I
considered?
don't like absolutes.
Yeah.
This is kind of what I'm afraid of is.
But if you don't have absolutes, you're gonna have a 20,000 square foot house.
You do want absolutes, and you do want prohibited.
Because you still have to get, you'll never get 20,000 square foot house because you still have 3%, 4% growth. And then you just can't
Go
get
back
that
to
big.
the comments.
But even if, again, even if you think about it once, we've been here.
Yeah,
We've been here, we just came up and said 5.75.
I know, it's hard, I know, we're struggling, everyone has, it seems like there's a hard to find a consensus on
I want five
this.
sentences.
Yeah.
If it were up to me, if I was
Yeah.
queen, right, for the day. Standard homes, only standard homes would be allowed on standard lots. And the increase in size of subsequent homes on bigger properties would be through ratio.
So I guess I just want to poll, so who wants to continue to explore this ratio, larger house allowed, larger size? You supporting that policy,
I would like
Gail?
to-
You are, Margie, how did you like this?
I like it, but
You-
I do want some absolute caps.
Yes, yeah,
So you made that mistake
Yes.
10 years
There-
ago.
yeah.
You went too high.
yeah,
Yeah.
okay, so we want, all right,
There's a-
Those are right.
you know, I don't,
I don't
you
want to
know,
do
you
that one.
have negative things in large home, but there's also a lot of positive things to large home. A lot of these people with large homes, they're just seasonal for long. They have, you know, the maintenance, the people that they hire to maintain their homes, taxes they pay. They don't, and all this stuff. I mean,
Yeah.
trying to mention it all.
Yeah,
I don't wanna
right.
Get too ahead of myself. But there are a lot of positives to large homes too. I know they have environmental impact, but, you can't just look at one side of the coin,
yeah,
All right, I think you're going to make your vote.
yeah, I'll pack it up, but we
Do
will,
you have a ride? Thank you.
thank you.
I'm gonna get right.
Okay, thanks, Elsa.
Okay, people, one other thing, very quickly, the next, we'll go, it was and then we can, adjourn. Okay, have you before us minutes for May 9th? I make a motion for the minutes be approved, second, any corrections? I have one, Chris Blue's name down at the bottom, not spelled correctly.
Oh my God. Yeah. Oh, worse.
Really?
Okay. Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Motion carries. Okay, and I make a motion for the meeting to adjourn. Thank you. And we'll all second it, thank you. Your meeting is better than mine.
Yes, thank you. Good night.